Animal Farm, which I remember first reading for the literature exam when I was, perhaps ironically, a student in an elite secondary school in Singapore many, many decades ago. Interestingly, we read it only as an allegory of how the historic communist revolution in Russia had led to far greater tyranny. So here's the story. Farm animals, dominated and exploited by their human masters, fight successfully for their freedom and equality. Their industrial policy delivers great economic success, which becomes the model for the world. One of the leaders quickly comes to dominate and accuses his rivals and critics of treachery, banishing them as traitors. The leader formulates a unifying ideology that is actually based on exclusion, all in an attempt to brainwash the animals and to shut down alternative thought. The animals work very hard for very long hours, motivated by the goal of progress for the farm. They have to give up part of what they make to the leaders of the farm and are told that it is for their own good, although they never get to know how it is used. Those who are deemed less productive when they get older are viewed as a burden and are removed from sight. The pigs, who are the smartest among the animals, form a new elite class, enjoying lavish lifestyles, while the lower animals continue to struggle. The leaders reward themselves for being able to make the lower animals work harder for much less compensation. Now, once conditions become intolerable, the lower animals revolt and overturn the tyranny of the pigs. So the original revolutionary goal of equality, according to Orwell, so easily slips into a new exploitative elitism. All right, enough of that. So now let's come back to Singapore. What are likely to be the unintended consequences that arise from the tragic arc of the Singapore story? First, we have already seen the widening of inequality, not only of income, but also wealth. And we also know that no matter how skillfully the statistics might be presented to suggest the problem is not so serious, the reality of inequality, especially in a dense, wealthy, increasingly expensive global city like Singapore, is experienced in everyday life and cannot so readily be trivialized by technocratic explanations. Other forms of inequality have also come to the fore. For instance, in the public discourse of multiracial and cosmopolitan Singapore, it has become much harder to solve inequalities of race, gender, sexuality, class, and the complex intersections among them. There are visible signs of poverty in this wealthy global city, even though official calculations of a poverty line are unavailable. There is dogged refusal to institute minimum wage in the firm belief that a more gradual and sectorally targeted progressive wage model is superior. Researchers tell us that every night, more than 1,000 people sleep on the streets and are thought to be homeless. Now, Singaporeans complain and foreigners observe that Singapore is a stressful place to work in. Singaporeans work long hours for salaries that seem to them unable to match the rising cost of living. And for careers whose prospects they suspect are limited because of unfair neoliberal practices, the idea of foreign talent comes into this story too. They are sleep deprived, highly stressed, exhausted, and concerned about their mental health. No wonder then that Singapore has one of the lowest birth rates in the world. Market fundamentalism, wonderful for globalization's winners, but it can bring hardship to the lives and the livelihoods of its losers, who wonder if their government is doing enough to redistribute globalization's gains. But market fundamentalism can also keep the economy stagnant in its narrow calculations, risk aversion, and lack of imagination. Meanwhile, laudable practices of meritocracy, which again was a key element of its success story, has degenerated into crude expressions of elitism. To those ordinary Singaporeans who feel burnt out in the constant pursuit of opportunities that seem ever more elusive, members of the establishment can appear entitled, condescending, arrogant, and yet not a little insecure as they justify with mechanical repetitiveness those neoliberal policies that seem primarily to favor themselves. From this vantage point, the view of how the wealthy and the powerful live in crazy rich Singapore is hard to accept. The opulent image of the elite contrasts starkly with the reputation for austerity that Lee Kuan Yew's team carefully cultivated in their leadership of what now seems like a very long ago Singapore. And as today's elite circles become increasingly closed, we can expect to find institutional decay and, shall we say, cultural and intellectual exhaustion. These are fertile grounds, I believe, for the rise of authoritarian forms of populism, first on the right and then on the left. Out of the elite circle and fueled by growing intra-elite rivalries, I think will emerge demagogues, charismatic and manipulative sweet talkers who are more interested in building a mass support base and doing this by channeling popular energies and frustrations and anger against the traditional establishment and against the plural society. If we are not careful, Singapore may become a starkly divided society with low levels of trust, whose public language is filled with condescension, bullying, hate speech, and conspiracy theories.